Ancient armies didn't just fight with swords, they weaponized the entire animal kingdom. On the battlefields of antiquity, victory often belonged not to the army with the sharpest steel, but to the one with the most cunning and terrifying allies. These weren't just men, but creatures great and small, conscripted into the art of war. From the depths of the ocean to the skies above, animals were transformed from forces of nature into instruments of chaos, fear, and strategic genius. This is the untold story of how ancient warfare became a battle of beasts. First, consider the titan of the ancient battlefield, the war elephant. Their power on land is legendary, but their aquatic capabilities were a closely guarded secret. Carthaginian commanders, masters of unconventional tactics, trained their elephants for amphibious assaults. These colossal animals could swim for miles, crossing vast bodies of water to outflank their enemies. Holding their massive trunks above the surface like snorkels, they could navigate over 10 kilometers of open sea, emerging from the waves to strike where they were least expected. Imagine the shock of a Roman legionary, guarding a coastline thought to be secure, only to see a herd of armored behemoths rising from the sea itself. But not all animal weapons were about brute force. Some were designed for pure psychological terror. The scorpion bomb was a horrifying reality for soldiers defending a fortress. Persian and later Roman armies would pack clay pots with live, aggressive scorpions. During a siege, these fragile containers were hurled over the walls by catapults, shattering on impact. The sudden release of hundreds of venomous arachnids among tightly packed defenders caused immediate panic. Soldiers would break formation, frantically trying to avoid the skittering, stinging menace, their discipline dissolving into chaos as the true assault began. The ancient Chinese developed their own terrifying shock tactic, the fire oxen attack. During the chaos of the Warring States period, military strategist Tian Dan faced overwhelming odds. In a stroke of desperate genius, he rounded up over 1,000 oxen. He tied bundles of sharp reeds and fire lances soaked in grease to their tails and fastened blades to their horns. As night fell, the reeds were lit, and the terrified burning animals were stampeded directly into the enemy camp. The result was pandemonium. The charging beasts, maddened by pain and fire, gored and trampled everything in their path, setting tents ablaze and turning an organized army into a panicked mob. Naval warfare also saw its share of bizarre animal weaponry. A persistent, though perhaps apocryphal, tale speaks of burning monkeys. In the tight confines of ship-to-ship combat, attackers would allegedly soak small, agile monkeys in flammable oil. The animals would be set alight and released onto the deck of an enemy vessel. Frantic and in flames, they would climb the rigging and leap across the sails, spreading fire with terrifying speed. While difficult to substantiate, the mere concept illustrates the desperate search for any advantage on the high seas, turning living creatures into little more than mobile incendiary devices. Long before the invention of radio, reliable communication across vast, dangerous distances was a matter of life and death. Here, the humble pigeon proved more effective than any human runner. Messenger pigeons were an integral part of military logistics for centuries, used by Persians, Romans, and Greeks alike. These birds possessed an incredible homing instinct, capable of flying hundreds of miles back to their roost. Even through the chaos of active combat zones, with arrows flying and armies clashing below, they delivered their vital messages with an astonishing success rate of up to 90%, often proving faster and more reliable than any other form of communication. As cavalry became central to military might, protecting the valuable warhorse became a top priority. Armies across the ancient world, from the Parthians to the Sassanids, developed sophisticated horse armor, known as barding. This wasn't just simple leather. It was often intricate scale or lamellar armor covering the horse's neck, chest, and flanks. But the protection was also psychological. Many horses were fitted with menacing metal masks, or chamfrons, sometimes sculpted to look like monstrous or demonic creatures. An armored knight was intimidating, but a cavalry charge of what appeared to be armored beasts from a nightmare could shatter an infantry line's morale before the first blow was even struck. If horses were the cavalry, war dogs were the shock infantry. The use of canines in battle dates back to the earliest civilizations, but the Romans and Greeks perfected it. They favored large, powerful breeds like the Molossian hound, a predecessor to the modern mastiff. These dogs were often fitted with spiked collars and coats of mail. Trained to be fearless and aggressive, They were unleashed in disciplined packs to charge enemy infantry formations. Their primary targets were the legs and arms of soldiers. They would bite, lock on, and drag men down, breaking the cohesion of the phalanx and creating openings for the human soldiers who followed close behind. Perhaps the most visceral example of animal warfare was the Roman answer to the war elephant, the flaming pig. When facing the terrifying elephant charges of commanders like Pyrrhus of Epirus, the Romans discovered a peculiar weakness. Elephants, despite their size, are terrified by the high-pitched squeal of a pig. The Romans weaponized this. They would coat live pigs in flammable pitch, set them on fire, and release them towards the enemy's elephants. The pigs' agonizing screams of pain drove the elephants mad with fear. Instead of charging the Roman lines, the panicked behemoths would turn and stampede back through their own ranks, crushing their own soldiers and sowing complete disarray. Siege warfare often devolved into a grim battle of attrition, and here, even insects were weaponized. Ancient armies, including the Romans and Hittites, discovered the strategic value of bees. During a siege, soldiers would locate and capture large beehives. Using catapults or simply by hurling them over the walls, they would launch these hives into the enemy's fortifications. The impact would shatter the hive, releasing thousands of angry, stinging bees upon the defenders. Confined within the fortress walls with nowhere to run, soldiers would be swarmed, their ability to fight or maintain their posts completely compromised by a cloud of natural, biological pain. In one of the most famous and cunning uses of animals, the Persians exploited religious belief. During the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC, the Persian king Cambyses II knew that the Egyptians held cats to be sacred animals, associated with the goddess Bastet. To neutralize the Egyptians' formidable archers, he reportedly had his frontline soldiers carry live cats, or perhaps even painted them on their shields. The Egyptian archers, unwilling to risk harming the sacred animals, hesitated to fire their arrows. This psychological paralysis allowed the Persian forces to advance with greatly reduced casualties and ultimately win the battle. The sea held its own corps of animal guardians. While tales of their use in direct combat are likely exaggerated, there is evidence that ancient Greeks and Romans trained dolphins. These highly intelligent marine mammals were used to guard harbors and strategic anchorages. Their role was not to attack ships, but to serve as a biological sonar system. Trained to detect unauthorized swimmers or submerged saboteurs attempting to enter a port at night, the dolphins would alert human guards on the surface, providing an early warning system against naval infiltration that was impossible to replicate with the technology of the time. Sometimes an animal's most potent weapon was not its teeth or claws, but its smell. The Battle of Thymbra in 547 BC saw the Lydian king Croesus field a powerful cavalry force that he believed would sweep the Persians from the field. But the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, had a secret weapon. He placed his camels, normally used for baggage, at the front of his line. Horses, which are naturally unfamiliar with and terrified by the scent of camels, panicked as they approached. The Lydian cavalry charge disintegrated as the horses reared and bolted, becoming uncontrollable. Cyrus's infantry then advanced and routed the disorganized Lydian army, a victory won by scent alone. For soldiers engaged in the dirty subterranean work of siege tunneling, a new horror awaited. Defenders developed a gruesome counterattactic for dealing with enemy sappers trying to dig under their walls. They would capture and collect venomous snakes, creating deadly snake pits. When they intercepted an enemy tunnel, they would not simply collapse it. They would drill an opening from above and drop the writhing mass of vipers onto the unsuspecting miners below. In the dark, cramped confines of the tunnel, with no escape, the effect was devastating and utterly terrifying. Birds served not only as messengers, but also as primitive guidance systems. Viking explorers, most notably Floki Vilgerharson, famously used ravens to navigate the vast, featureless North Atlantic. By releasing a raven from their ship, they could determine the direction of land. If the bird circled and returned to the ship, it meant there was no land in sight. If it flew off in a specific direction, the crew knew to follow it to the nearest shore. In a military context, trained birds could be used by scouting parties to guide a main army, returning to known supply points or camps, and indicating the path for the larger force to follow. Once armies figured out how to use elephants, their enemies immediately started figuring out how to counter them. A common tactic was for skirmishers to try and hamstring the elephant or attack its less armored underbelly. To prevent this, Indian and Southeast Asian armies developed specialized elephant armor. Beyond simple plates, they added a terrifying defensive measure: massive, sharp spikes were attached to the elephant's tusks and sometimes integrated into its barding. This not only made the elephant a more lethal killing machine on the charge, but also made it nearly impossible for enemy infantry to get close enough to attack its vulnerable points without being impaled. While their use is less documented and more steeped in legend than that of dogs or elephants, the war bear stands as a fearsome symbol of battlefield terror. Several ancient and medieval cultures, particularly in northern and eastern Europe, are reported to have used captured bears in battle. These enormous predators were not typically trained in the same way as a dog, but were instead chained, starved, and goaded into a frenzy before being unleashed. A rampaging bear, even if chained, could sow immense panic and disruption, acting more as a weapon of pure, uncontrollable psychological shock than a disciplined military asset. Not every idea for animal warfare was a success. The concept of the firebird, an evolution of the burning monkey tactic, was one such failure. The idea was to capture birds, attach small, slow-burning embers to their feet or tails, and release them over an enemy city or camp. In theory, the birds would land on flammable thatched roofs or tents, starting hundreds of fires simultaneously. In practice, the plan was fatally flawed. The birds were completely unpredictable. Many would simply return to their point of origin, setting their own camp ablaze, while others might fly in entirely the wrong direction. The idea was too dangerous and unreliable to ever be effectively implemented. Camels, beyond their use in frightening horses, were formidable battle platforms in their own right. Their ability to endure the harsh conditions of the desert made them essential for armies operating in the Middle East and North Africa. But they were more than just transport. Bedouin and Parthian warriors used them as heavy cavalry, with archers or spearmen riding high on their backs. A charging line of battle camels was an intimidating sight, their height giving their riders a commanding view and a significant advantage over foot soldiers, combining the utility of a transport animal with the shock value of a heavy war beast. The psychological impact of horses was a weapon in itself, a fact that ancient commanders consciously amplified. Beyond just armor and masks, horses were adorned to inspire maximum fear. Their manes were dyed bright colors, intricate patterns were clipped into their coats, and they were festooned with noisy bells and colorful streamers. The goal was to transform a cavalry charge from a simple military maneuver into a terrifying sensory assault. The thundering hooves, the glinting armor, the demonic masks, and the cacophony of sounds were all designed to overwhelm and break an enemy's will to fight before contact was even made. Finally, long before motion sensors and alarms, the keen senses of animals provided the best security a military camp could have. Dogs, with their sharp hearing and sense of smell, were indispensable sentries, able to detect the scent of approaching enemies on the wind or hear the quiet footsteps of a nighttime raiding party long before a human guard could. Even geese, as the Romans famously learned when the sacred geese of Juno's temple alerted the city to a stealthy Gallic attack, served as noisy and effective alarm systems. Birds and dogs were the first line of defense, their natural instincts serving as the most reliable technology available to protect a sleeping army. In the Grand Chronicle of Warfare, the stories of these animal soldiers are often overlooked. They were not mere tools, but active participants whose instincts, strengths, and even fears were strategically woven into the fabric of battle. Their presence on the battlefield was a testament to human ingenuity and ruthlessness. They were the living weapons of the ancient world, and their legacy is a stark reminder that in the quest for victory, humanity has always been willing to enlist all of nature in its cause. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with fellows. Your support helps us bring you more captivating content like this.